True Crime Files of Los Angeles digs into the old criminal files to review what were the true facts, some of the most interesting and sensational cases of all times. Here we go behind the scenes to review what the detectives did in the investigation, how they tracked down the criminals. Further, we examine the jury trial to see what evidence was presented to the jury. And in the end, we reveal the results of the case as well as what happened to all of those various characters in the case. So let's get started today on the case that we've selected to examine. What were the facts? We've compiled 87 new and different podcasts, which we'll be releasing if there's enough interest. So click the subscribe button if you want to see and hear more True Crime Files podcasts. And remember, they're released on Friday at 3 o'clock. So just think of, thank God it's Friday, and at 3 o'clock you'll see and watch another True Crime Files of Los Angeles podcast. See you then. Well, what's our case about today? Well, it's the Starlet Murders, better known as the Kristi Johnson case. Well, what's it all about? Well, we have to talk about the Hollywood Hills. There's a lot of hikers up there, especially under the Hollywood sign. Beautiful view from up there on top. You can see all of Los Angeles. So many hikers go out there. And there's one road in particular, it's an old fire road. And many of the hikers will take it. And we're going to talk about March the 3rd, 2003. It's in the afternoon, somewhere between 2, maybe 2:30. We have a group that's going across this fire road. And as they're coming along, there's not anything spectacular about the fire road. It's a dirt pathway, but it's easy to do. There's a little bit of an incline in one section of it, but otherwise it's a perfect hiking trail. Now, they were coming along, and then as I see the group, one of the fellows, he stopped and he looked down the canyon, and he saw something down the canyon. He couldn't make out what it was, and he called the others over and tried to get them interested in what this is. But it had been raining. It stopped raining then, but it was really muddy out there, and nobody wanted to go down to check it out. However, he did. He decided to go down the side of the slope to see what is it. It kind of looked like a mannequin. And he gets down there, and as he gets closer to it, what would a mannequin be on the side of a Hollywood Hills slope there? As he gets closer, he determines it's a dead body. It's a dead body. Wow. So he comes back up, and then they call the police. The police come out, and they start an investigation. And the big issue is, how do you get the body out of there? And it's pretty difficult. So they call the fire department to go up there to take one of their ladder trucks up there, and they hooked a cable to it, and they tried to put a basket on it to lift the body out. And they did. They were able to pull the body up, and then when they got to the top, they pulled it back over and released it on the fire road there, and took the body out of the basket. They turned it over to the coroner's office, and the coroner put it in the van and took it down to the coroner's office where they would do an autopsy on it on Mission Road in East Los Angeles. Now, who was the victim? Who was Kristi Johnson? Well, Kristi Johnson was born and raised in Michigan, and most of her life was there until her parents divorced. And her mother decided to come out to California to start a new life, and eventually Kristi decided she wanted to follow her mother, and they came out to, I think it was Santa Maria, California, and she got a part-time job up there and was going to community college. But the job was with a studio movie company that was making a movie for Sandra Bullock called Murder by Numbers. And she was just fascinated by, what everybody did. It was exciting work. Everybody was having a good time. And she decided, I want to get involved in the movie business. So she came down to Los Angeles, Burbank area, and she got a job at Warner Brothers. And there, she worked as a, kind of like a beautician, was a hairstylist. She did that for 2 years, hoping that she would be discovered and might be able to get some type of part in the movies. Well, like with many young ladies, it didn't work out. She wasn't discovered. So then she decided, well, I'm going to go back to school, community college. So she moved out to Santa Monica, and she got 2 roommates to join her in renting an apartment, this apartment here in Santa Monica. So that was what she was doing, and life went on for her. And we're going to direct our attention to the date of February 15, 2003. Kristi, it was a Saturday morning, and she'd gotten a gift certificate from her mother for Valentine, and she was going to go shopping, and she decided to go over to the Century City Mall, very fashionable shopping area. And she went in there. There's a number of stores to select from, and she went to MACY'S, which is the kind of the main store there. Went in, looked around to see if she could find something interesting, something on sale, but she didn't really find anything. So she steps outside, and she's walking outside the mall, and she's walking by Victoria's Secret store, just kind of standing there, and there's a man that comes up, stands next to her. She didn't know who he was, and he started talking to her, and he said, you're so beautiful, you should be in movies. And he went on to say that he was doing a James Bond sequel, and he was looking for new talent, and that's why he was in the mall there, looking for any young ladies who might be interested in a James Bond sequel. He continued to talk to her, and she wondered, okay, that's kind of interesting, and she started thinking about the James Bond movies. She'd seen many of them, and she always was impressed with them. She remembered Sean Connery and all the other, Roger Moore, Pierce Brosnan, and even Daniel Craig, the most recent one. And she thought, well, that's interesting. And then the James Bond girls, wow, what careers they all had, became stars in their own right. And, the list went on and on. Ursula Andrews at the beginning, Diane Riggs, Jill St. John, Jane Seymour, Britta Eklund, Barbara Bach, Minnie Driver, Terry Hatcher, and then Holly Berry. Wow. For her to be in that company, that would be just terrific. So she's thinking, maybe this is the chance I've been waiting for. And she's standing there, outside Victoria's Secret. This guy then says, we're having an audition at 5 o'clock. You really should, consider it. You're attractive enough for it. I think you'd get the part. For whatever reason, Kristi said, okay, I'll come to the audition, Beverly Hills. And then she said, what should I wear? And the man said, yeah, that would really impress the agent and the director that will be at the audition. They're looking for a certain type of look for the James Bond girl. And he said, a white blouse with a very short mini skirt and stiletto heels. That's what really impresses them. If you got that, I think you have a great chance of getting the part. So she started thinking, well, now where would I get all these items? And she started shopping at Bloomingdale's, which was right kind of next door. She went in there, she got the hosiery there that she needed, and there was that white shirt, the largely white shirt that he said that she was going to need, and very expensive, but she decided to get it. This may be her big chance. Then after Bloomingdale, she went over to Guess store, and there she found the miniskirt. The miniskirt was there, she bought it, so she was kind of on her way And here, this shows her determination. Look at her face there, how determined she was. She wanted to be a James Bond girl and be discovered. So she has almost everything, but she doesn't have the stiletto heels. Now, where is she going to find it? He had mentioned you can get stiletto heels over at Trashy Lingerie on La Cienega. So she went over there, she drove over there, and it was about 2:40 now, getting a little later. She goes in there, and she finds the stiletto heels, her size. They were perfect. So she buys them, and she's all set. She has everything she needs. So she wants to head back to her apartment to try all these things on and get ready. She wants to show, what she has to her roommate. She, really impressed with what she's been able to come up with. And she puts the clothing on, kind of models it for her roommate. And then she gets ready, gets her makeup, and she doesn't want to be late. So she leaves. She gets in her Miata car and she drives out of the parking garage. And she goes over to the Hollywood Hills where she was supposed to go for the audition. But she got lost. The streets in the Hollywood Hills are not perpendicular. They just weave around the hillside. And she couldn't find her way where she was supposed to go. And she sees this man down by this mailbox. And she pulls up to him and says, Sir, can you help me out? I'm supposed to go and make a turn at a castle house. And he said, well, I don't know what you're talking about as far as a castle house. His wife came over, walked down the driveway, and she said, oh, I think I know what you mean. You mean that castle house down 2 blocks from here. So if you make a left and make a right, you'll find that castle house. And sure enough, when she left, she found that castle house with a road that went up the hill to where the audition was going to be. Now she's driving up this hill. It's getting dark. It's supposed to be there at 5 o'clock. It was a few minutes before 5, and she could see the Hollywood sign in the background. And just think of what's going through Kristi's mind. She's going to an audition for a James Bond girl, and there's the Hollywood sign. Something so many girls dream of. And she pulls up right there. And she's never seen, she's never heard from again. That was the end of Kristi Johnson. What happened? Well, what we do know about Kristi Johnson, she was supposed to go to a rave concert that night. She had tickets to it, but she never showed up. She never showed up at that rave concert. Well, this is kind of a calendar to show you. She was going to go to the audition. We know about that. And the rave concert, she had the tickets for it, but didn't show. And then on Sunday, the 16th, she never came home. And she made no contact with her mother or her roommate or anyone on that day. So by the 17th, the mother and the roommate are thinking, well, maybe we have a missing person situation. So they call up the Santa Monica Police Department, because they're in the city of Santa Monica, and says, Kristi Johnson, she didn't show up. She's missing. We don't know what happened to her. So a missing persons report is filed with the Santa Monica Police Department. Now, Santa Monica took this very seriously, and they decided to have a news conference, and the news media was called out there. And at that news conference, they released the photograph of Kristi, and they stated she was supposed to go meet a photographer, possibly to pose for pictures in Beverly Hills. Okay, that was the article. And there was a woman who was reading the newspaper that morning. She was having coffee. Her name was Susan. And the more she read the article, she thought, wow, that seems familiar. about a week before, January 24th, I went to the Century City Mall and I met a person there who talked about a James Bond sequel, having photographs taken, going to an audition. And these were the directions. She was told to go to an address on La Cienega Boulevard. And she did. She went there, and just where that circle is, she was standing there waiting, and this man came up who was a person she had met before, claimed to be a photographer, and they were going to have this audition. And he grabs her, and he takes her over to this building, tries to pull her in there. Fortunately, she had come with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend was in a parked car. He gets out, and he runs over and was able to fight off this individual, and she was saved. So Susan's thinking, well, wow, that's kind of interesting. Sounds very familiar because, I went to the Century City Mall, met a producer there regarding photographs, audition, a James Bond sequel, and he told me certain clothes to wear: a long sleeve white shirt, miniskirt, and stiletto heels. So when she called the Santa Monica police and told them about this, they thought, wow, that's identical to what the roommate, Kristi Johnson's roommate, had said. So now they knew that there's a connection between the two. They asked her to come down to the police department, and she did. And they got a forensic artist there. And they said, okay, describe this person. Let's see if we can do a sketch. So they do this sketch. It was Susan, and it was published in the newspaper. The LA Times, published this, and that was the next day. And a parole officer is, looking at the newspaper, and when she sees that sketch, she said, "That's one of my parolees, Victor Palologos. I'm sure that's him. It looks exactly like him." So she contacts the Santa Monica Police Department, and they decide to have a lineup with Victor Palologos, and they do. And Susan's there, and she positively identifies Victor Palologos as the one who she met at the mall, who was doing a James Bond sequel, and that was trying to attack her when she went for that audition. So the detectives from Santa Monica wanted to talk to Palologos, and they said, well, do you know Kristi Johnson? Do you know who she is? And he totally denied. No, I don't know who she is. I don't know anything about that. Now, his picture was put in the newspaper, and it was published. And many, many young ladies started contacting the Santa Monica Police Department, and they said, yeah, this guy approached me at, a restaurant or a shopping center. He told me he was working for Disney or some film company, and he was doing a James Bond sequel. And he told me what to wear, and these are the items to wear to the audition. So all these became calls coming in, and one of them involved an Elizabeth, and it was back in 1991. And Palologos, his MO at the time was a little bit different. He met her at a restaurant in Santa Monica, and they were having drinks there, and he says, yeah, I work for Disney, and I'm doing a James Bond sequel right now, and I'm looking for talent. And so they're sitting there, and he buys her a drink, and she went to the restroom, came back. When she came back, she noticed there was white powdery substance in the drink, and she took a sip of it. She knows something was wrong with it, and then she decides to contact the police, and he takes off running, runs away. And when they tested it, and sure enough, it was a date drink. And she was very fortunate. She didn't drink it and hadn't passed out. But what was interesting, Palologos, his pattern changed slightly. And by 1998, he meets Heather at the Sky Bar. And he tells her to wear the same type of clothing, the white blouse, the miniskirt, the stiletto heels. And she does it all. She gets it all ready. And she goes for the audition. And it was going to take place at the Ritz-Carlton in Marina Del Rey. And he's down there. She meets him there. And he said, oh, yeah, the audition is going to be at a restaurant that's being remodeled. So come with me, and I'll take you over there. And she goes with him over there. And then he attacks her. He tries to rape her, takes a necktie around her neck. So she reports it to the police, and they're able to prosecute him. And he's convicted. He's convicted of attempt rape of Heather. So he goes to prison, and when he gets out of prison, his MO changes a little bit. Now he's using shopping centers. He meets the women in the shopping centers, but he uses the same clothing that they should wear, and he's doing a James Bond sequel. So this was the chart that was used in the trial, showing all the women. There were so many women that came forth, contacted the police department, and it was the same pattern. Most of them at the end were from the Century City Mall, but he was always generally with the Disney Studios doing a James Bond sequel and the same type of clothing. So how did he set up these auditions, the locations? Well, he used real estate agents, and it was kind of an interesting process that he used. He contacted a real estate agent in West Hollywood, and he said, I'm out here from New York, and I want to find a house in the Hollywood Hills, but it has to be a real quiet place. And so the agent was ecstatic to show him property, and showed him a number of pieces of property. Every time he would take him in there, and Pellogo would say, well, okay, go to the other end and, make some noise, and I want to see how noisy this place is. In the process, what Pellogo's do, he would unlock the windows so that the agent didn't see him do this, so that Pellogo could break into the house later on. It was vacant, and he could bring women over there and use it as a place that he would claim for auditions. So that was the way that he would set it up. And just to show you some of the vacant houses that were up for sale, they were all over the Hollywood Hills. And one of them was this one. And this was where Kristi Johnson was going for her audition. It was one of the houses that the real estate agent had shown Pelogos several days earlier. And you can see down from there was where her body was found, just off that fire road, maybe 1,000 feet away. Well, the prosecution of the case began, and these were the charges that were filed. In particular, the main charge was the murder charge of Kristi Johnson. So the jury trial began, and the prosecution presented their evidence, and they had the cell phone evidence, which could show that he was at the using his phone in the area of the Century City Mall exactly at the time that Kristi Johnson was there. Also, there were a number of women, almost 8 or 10, that testified to the MO, that he used the same routine, the same pattern. James Bond, wear certain clothing, meet him at the Century City Mall, as well as go to an audition. Now, for his defense, he was claiming he was going to have an alibi defense, as well as, there was no eyewitnesses to Kristi Johnson being, killed in the Hollywood Hills. And there was no CSI evidence, meaning there was no DNA, there was no ballistics. So, for whatever reason, he decided to plead guilty if the prosecution would give him a life sentence. And it was agreed that they would give a life sentence, meaning it would not be life without the possibility of parole. He wanted to be able to get parole after so many years. So he pled guilty, and that was the end of the case. Now the question today is, Should he be paroled? Now, he's up for parole. Now, would women be safe if he is out on parole? Now, after you look at his record and what he had done over the years, and we're talking about many years, can you trust this predator? What is the answer? If you want more information about the Kristi Johnson case, get my book, Meet Me for Murder, and it tells you the facts, and it tells you what went on behind the scenes and how a case was made. So you can check it out, Meet Me for Murder. Well, hopefully you found the Starlet Murders, the Kristi Johnson case, interesting. And you'll join us again with another True Crime Files of Los Angeles by Ronald E. Bowers. See you then.